This coming Sunday is Proper 19, or the 14th Sunday after Pentecost. The gospel passage that Gaffney chose for this week's lectionary is Matthew 6, 9-13. It's the Our Father prayer, or the Lord's Prayer. These are verses that I'm sure we all know by heart and have prayed many, 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 many times. I was surprised when I was looking at it. I was surprised to realize, however, that these verses containing Jesus's example of how to pray are found right smack in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. When I noticed that, I consulted trusty Mr. Google and saw that, sure enough, Matthew's chapters 5-7 are a literary unit shaped in a chiasm. So as some of you know, a chiasm is an ancient literary structure that is super common in the Bible. I don't want to geek out on you about chiasms right now. So I will just say that in the middle, the very center of the chiasm, is found a pearl. It's the center, the climax, the point of the literary chunk. So I wonder, when you all have thought about the Sermon on the Mount, have you ever considered that the Lord's Prayer is the climax? I hadn't. So there's no doubt that the entire Sermon on the Mount is important, but the pearl of Jesus's sermon that Matthew wanted to highlight for his readers and for us is the Lord's Prayer. So as we contemplate this prayer today, I invite us to view it not as a formulaic prayer or a rote ritual, but as a pearl of wisdom. Because this prayer isn't a narrative story and it's relatively short, I've decided to change up the structure of our contemplation. So instead of only reading Gaffney's translation, I've decided to read this prayer in 4 different translations or paraphrases. Each time I will read it slowly with questions and pauses, and I won't start with a read through like I normally do, because I'm assuming that this prayer is so much a part of who we are already that we don't need a refresher in it. So since we're doing it 4 times through, I thought we would skip the first one. So I'm hoping that doing it in these different paraphrases will help give us some fresh insights and new perspectives on this pearl of a prayer. So to begin, I will light my candle as a symbol of God's presence with us here today. There we go. And I pray for the following graces: to know Jesus more intimately, to love him more intensely, and to follow him more closely. Before I guide you through the prayer with questions and pauses, let us take a couple of centering breaths, breathing in God's Spirit and breathing out anything that distracts you from being in the presence of God. I pray again for our graces to know Jesus more intimately, to love him more intensely, and to follow him more closely. I invite you to enter the prayer as translated by Wilda Gaffney. As you enter the scene, imagine Jesus speaking directly to us here in this gathered Zoom space, giving us an example of how to pray, not as a stage performer with the desire to be seen by others, and not by heaping up empty phrases with many words, but simply speaking to the one who already knows our needs and cares deeply for us. Jesus says to us, "Pray then in this way." What does it feel like to have Jesus give you direct instructions? Our parent and provider in heaven, how does God parent you? How does God provide for you? Holy is your name. In what ways do you recognize that God's name is holy? May your majestic rule come. What might that look like? May your will be done on earth as in heaven. What might that look like? Give us this day our daily bread. Imagine being fed daily by God. Is this bread for only you or for others too? And forgive us our debts. What debts do you owe that need to be forgiven? As we also forgive our debtors. Imagine what it would be like to forgive someone who is indebted to you. What emotions does that stir within you? And do not bring us into the time of trial, but rescue us from that which is evil. What trials and evils do you face? Be specific in your mind's eye as you imagine God rescuing you from evils. Amen. So for those of you who joined after I began, I'm going to now read with pauses and questions the same prayer 3 more times from 3 other versions or paraphrases. So now I will read Reverend Yolanda Norton's Beyonce Mass version. Our Mother. How does it feel to address this prayer to our Mother instead of our Father? Who is in heaven and within us. Imagine God in the heaven space and in our Zoom space and within each one of us. We call upon your names. What names do you call God? Your wisdom, come. What wisdom is God speaking into your life right now? Your will be done in all the spaces in which you dwell. What might this look like practically? God's will being done in all the places in which God dwells. Give us each day sustenance and perseverance. How does this feel? Remind us of our limits as we give grace to the limits of others. How does this feel? Giving grace and receiving grace. Separate us from the temptation of empire and deliver us into community. How does this feel? For you are the dwelling place within us, the empowerment around us, and the celebration among us, now and forever. Imagine what it would be like to constantly be mindful of God's presence and to constantly celebrate God's presence. Amen. And now I will read with pauses the version that the Benedictine women of Madison recite at the Holy Wisdom Monastery in Wisconsin. Holy One, our only home. Consider God as our only true home. Blessed be your name. How do we bless God's name? May your day dawn. May your will be done here as in heaven. What does this look like? God's will being done here. Feed us today and forgive us as we forgive each other. What does this look like? Do not forsake us at the test, but deliver us from evil. What does this look like? For the glory, the power, and the mercy are yours now and forever. Take a moment in the silence to worship God with your thoughts. Amen. And the final reading is a paraphrase written by former Episcopalian priest Sarah Dillon Brewer. Loving Creator, we honor you. In what ways do we honor our Creator? And we honor all that you have made. How can we honor God's entire creation? Renew the whole world in the image of your love. Imagine the renewed world that perfectly reflects the Creator's love. Give us what we need for today and a hunger to see the whole world fed. Imagine all of the world's needs satisfied. Strengthen us for what lies ahead. What are you facing now that requires strength? Imagine God strengthening you, giving you courage to face whatever it is that you're coming up against. Heal us from the hurts of the past. What pain do you carry? What pain do our communities carry? Imagine the Creator healing all of these wounds. Give us courage to follow your call in this moment. What are you currently called to do or to be? Sometimes it takes courage to just be in God's presence. For your love is the only power, the only home, the only honor we need in this world and in the world to come. Amen. I invite you to spend the next 10 minutes in a colloquy with the divine. Speak to God about what you experienced during the contemplation. And what might God be saying to you about your life or the life of your community as it relates to this prayer? When I sound my chimes, this will indicate that you have about a minute to wrap up your colloquy, after which time I will end the silence with another prayer based on the Lord's Prayer. If you're doing this contemplation later with the recording, go ahead and hit pause now so that you can spend as much time in conversation with God as you feel you need, and then restart the video when you're ready to hear the final Lord's Prayer. I will close our time of silence with a Lord's Prayer for Justice, written by Father Ronald Rolheiser in 1996. This one is rather long. This is prayer with commentary. Our Father, who always stands with the weak, the powerless, the poor, the abandoned, the sick, the aged, the very young, the unborn, and those who, by victim of circumstance, bear the heat of the day. Who art in heaven, where everything will be reversed, where the first will be last and the last will be first, but where all will be well and every manner of being will be well. Hallowed be thy name. May we always acknowledge your holiness, respecting that your ways are not our ways, your standards are not our standards. May the reverence we give your name pull us out of the narcissism, selfishness, and paranoia that prevents us from seeing the pain of our neighbor. Your kingdom come. Help us to create a world where, beyond our own needs and hurts, we will do justice, love tenderly, and walk humbly with you and each other. Your will be done. Open our freedom to let you in, so that the complete mutuality that characterizes your life might flow through our veins, and thus the life that we help generate may radiate your equal love for all and your special love for the poor. On earth as in heaven, may the work of our hands, the temples and structures we build in this world, reflect the temple and the structure of your glory, so that the joy, graciousness, tenderness, and justice of heaven will show forth within all of our structures on earth. Give life and love to us and help us to see always everything as a gift. Help us to know that nothing comes to us by right, and that we must give because we have been given to. Help us realize that we must give to the poor, not because they need it, but because our own health depends upon our giving to them. Us, the truly plural us, give not just to our own, but to everyone, including those who are very different than the narrow us. Give your gifts to all of us equally. This day, not tomorrow, do not let us push things off until some indefinite future, so that we can continue to live justified lives in the face of injustice, because we can use present philosophical, political, economic, logistic, and practical difficulties as an excuse for inactivity. Our daily bread, so that each person in the world may have enough food, enough clean water, enough clean air, adequate health care, and sufficient access to education, so as to have the sustenance for a healthy life. Teach us to give from our sustenance and not just from our surplus. And forgive us our trespasses. Forgive us our blindness toward our neighbor, our obsessive self-preoccupation, our racism, our sexism, and our incurable propensity to worry only about ourselves and our own. Forgive us our capacity to watch the evening news and do nothing about it. As we forgive those who trespass against us, help us to forgive those who victimize us. Help us to mellow out in spirit, to not grow bitter with age, to forgive the imperfect parents and systems that wounded, cursed, and ignored us. And do not put us to the test. Do not judge us only by whether we have fed the hungry, given clothing to the naked, visited the sick, or tried to mend the systems that victimize the poor. Spare us this test, for none of us can stand before this gospel scrutiny. Give us instead more days to mend our ways, our selfishness, and our systems. But deliver us from evil. That is, from the blindness that lets us continue to participate in anonymous systems within which we need not see who gets less as we get more. Amen.